When talking about synchronizing audio and video, there are tons of different ways how you can achieve that. You can match the waveform, you can clap sync, you can also look at the metadata and use something like timecode synchronization. Now, I have talked about the devices like the Track E as well as the Sync E from Tentacle Sync since they have been provided to me a couple of months ago, a couple of times. Today in this video, I want to show you the application that these devices also come with, but you can also purchase individually because it actually helps you a ton in synchronizing your audio and video based on timecode synchronization. Now, timecode is something that can either be written into the metadata of your files, so this is the audio and video files, or it can also be provided by an audio signal, which is a brrr sound. And that is actually also something that I already showcased and described a little better in my video about timecode synchronization and what it actually is. Now, these two different types of timecode can then be used on your computer when you're ingesting all your files to easily synchronize everything back together. The benefits of that are covered in the other video that I just mentioned and is also linked down in the description. Now, the two main benefits that come with timecode synchronization are that you can start and stop your devices whenever you want, and you will still be able to synchronize things together despite them not being clap synced or anything like that. And then back at your workstation, you can actually let a computer program do all the work of syncing everything up neatly onto your timeline. Now, that's exactly where we are going to jump in today with the Tentacle Sync Studio. Because there are actually not that many applications out there that do timecode synchronization really nicely. And I have to say the Tentacle Sync Studio is definitely one of those programs that just makes life that much easier if you are doing this type of work on and on again. Now, there is a way to do this with DaVinci Resolve as well, even in the free version. So you have possibilities there. And I will make a video specifically about the workflow in DaVinci Resolve with the exact same data set that I am demonstrating here. However, if you are purchasing any of the Tentacle Sync devices like the Track E or the Sync E set, then you automatically also get a license of the Tentacle Sync Studio software. Actually, there's a bit of a backstory to how I got to know Tentacle Sync, and it has everything to do with the Sync Studio software. Because a couple of months ago, I actually started to work with timecode, or wanted to start to work with timecode, as I found out that the Zoom F6 has a timecode out as well as in port. Now, what I was trying to do is I was trying to link that timecode out to my Canon EOS R so that then I would be able to synchronize based on timecode. However, what I also learned is that to be able to do that synchronization, I would actually need a program that can understand the audio timecode signal and then use the metadata of the Zoom F6's files and sync those things up. Now, there aren't really that many software solutions out there that I was able to find, and the Tentacle Sync software was one of the ones that I thought about getting. Now, I'm also a programmer, so I even started to kind of develop a framework in Node.js to try to read WAV files as well as video files, understand how the pattern of the SMPTE timecode works, and also be able to programmatically recognize the timecode frame rate and such things that is actually encoded into that information. However, that quickly became a task for multiple days worth of work. And that actually also reminded me of this kind of thought pattern that you should probably not spend hours and hours or even days of your own time if you can purchase a tool that can do the same thing for you. Now, the Tentacle Sync Studio is a software that's not necessarily super cheap. However, if you compare it to the time saved by either not developing it yourself or the time saved that you don't need to spend in synchronizing audio and video tracks in the back end, then the software quickly becomes a no-brainer. So I was just moments away from purchasing the software when I actually reached out to get a couple more information pieces about the software and also how it all works. And that's actually where all of this started, and we had a phone call, and that's where they offered me to send to Track E as well as to Sync E so that I would be able to use those in my own work as well as make videos for you about timecode synchronization, how all of that works, and with that, of course, also provide information pieces about their products. I have not been paid by Tentacle Sync to make these videos or say anything that I don't want to say. I just was provided these devices. But so it all started with this software, and I think that it actually is a really, really cool tool. It's something that you don't necessarily see thrown around a whole lot because timecode synchronization is not necessarily something that everybody's doing. However, in that area, I do believe that it is pretty much the best software on the market. But what is this software doing and how does it actually interact with your files? And I think for that, it is time to jump over to the screen and first have a look at the website. Now, the Tentacle Sync Studio is a tool to batch timecode synchronize your clips so that you don't have to do that manually or even just trying to align certain things yourself. You don't have to do any of that as long as your clips have timecode synchronization information, so the SMPT timecode either in the file metadata or in the audio channel. Now, you can download a free trial of this software, so that's definitely a possibility, but it is rather limited. The really cool thing about this software is that it actually works for pretty much any timecode-based system, and you will find that it also supports a lot of different file formats as well as audio timecode formats and such things. So it's not limited to the devices that Tentacle Sync produces, but rather it is a tool that actually works with pretty much any timecode system. Now, as you can see on the website, you can find a lot of information there, but we're also going to do a deep dive into the application itself in just a moment. Now, something that I want to highlight here is that they are actually not just providing the timecode synchronization, but you can also embed your timecode information then into the video files if you choose to do that. And not just that, they're also providing a transcoding service or a transcoding mechanism so that you can actually produce ProRes proxies or high-resolution files from your original footage with the timecode information embedded. This can be really, really useful because that way you can do two steps in one, where you have the synchronization of the timecode and at the same time you also produce your proxy files, for example, to work with in your NLE. And something that I tried to program in my own tool, however, that was really, really difficult to achieve, is actually this part right here, where they write that they have an advanced audio timecode reading algorithm. And that is something that I actually can definitely attest to, because I was trying to have the timecode recorded with an auxiliary cable into my Canon EOS R coming from the Zoom F6. However, the combination of the really loud timecode signal from the Zoom F6 combined with the input on the Canon EOS R, which has a kind of like a compressor on it or something, destroyed the normally really clean signal, and it wasn't readable by other programs. However, the Tentacle Sync Studio still was able to exactly extract the information of timecode from those files, even though it was not really a clean timecode signal. So that was really, really impressive and something that just made me more curious to look into the software even more. Now, something to note here is that the Tentacle Sync Studio actually is only available for macOS. They are providing a Windows counterpart. However, I have heard that that is not as advanced as the macOS version. However, it does work and it is provided free of charge. So if you are on Windows, that might be an option for you. Now, for macOS, you can download the version right here, or you can get the beta version for macOS Big Sur. Now, just to include that information as well, if you go to the shop.tentaclesync.com, you can see that the Tentacle Sync Studio actually costs 149 euros and you can purchase a license right there. That might be interesting for you if you don't want to use the Tentacle Sync hardware. However, you still want to use the software for synchronizing other timecode system-based things. Now, if you purchase any of these products like the Track E, the Sync E, and even a single Sync E, you will actually get a license for the Tentacle Sync Studio included with the hardware purchase. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to purchase both of them. You can just get the set, for example, of the Sync E and purchase that. And with that, you will also get the software so that you can synchronize everything on your computer. Now, once you have downloaded the software, the installation is very easy. It's just a drag and drop as you know it from macOS applications. And then once you start it up, it looks kind of like this. Now I have prepared a folder full of files here, which are all timecode enabled. So they either have audio timecode with the Sync or they have timecode based on metadata. There are tracks recorded with the Canon EOS R cameras that I have available here. And I have tracks from the iPhone, the Track E, as well as the Zoom F6. And all of these are actually able to be synchronized with this metadata trick. Now, if I bring all of these tracks into Premiere Pro, let's see what we can do with those there. Because that is, of course, the normal workflow. You would just import everything into Premiere Pro, or at least that is one workflow how you can achieve those things. We take one of those clips. Let's say we have the EOS R1, which is the recording from the Adamus Ninja V. And then we have the EOS R2 tracks. So these are right there. And then we can also include some of the, let's say we take the Zoom F6 audio track. And now these two on the Adamus actually have no information, so I'm going to delete those and bring those others back up. And then we have this right here, and we just take the camera that we have here and also align this. So now, one of the ways how you can actually synchronize these things, of course, is just selecting them, right-click, and then going down to Synchronize. And of course, the synchronization is only available if you have all the tracks on their own little track. So even if you know that footage is from one camera and it can stay on one track, it would not work for the synchronization. So now we can select all of these, right-click, and do the Synchronize, and then say OK. And now this actually would try to synchronize things, but as you can see, of course, also because we don't have the right audio information available here, it would try to align those things. However, it is doing that not based on metadata or timecode information. It is doing that only based on the audio tracks. So that is rather cumbersome of a process, and I think that it works for many use cases. However, for some other use cases, it really doesn't, and it is a whole lot of work. Now let's compare that to how the timecode synchronization in the Tentacle Sync Studio works. And there, we just take all of these files, we drag and drop them into the Tentacle Sync Studio. And as you can see, you have the files here on the left. You even get thumbnails and a whole host of metadata and information about the files as well as you scroll through these. Now, the information that you have available here on a track-by-track basis is, of course, the file name, the size, how long the track is, and the creation time based on the camera, time, and date. Next, we have information about the video component of this file, in this case a ProRes LT file with a resolution of Full HD and 24 frames per second. The audio is a LPCM 4-channel 24-bit 48,000 Hertz, and we have file timecode as well as audio timecode. Now, something to note here is that in this case, this is something that is being recorded with the Adamus Ninja V. However, I don't have the timecode synchronization module for the Adamus, so the file timecode is simply the time and date that I set on the device. So this is not necessarily very reliable in my setup. Now, if you were to use the timecode synchronization module, the Atom X module, then of course the file timecode could also be the correct timecode. So in my case, the correct timecode on this file is actually the audio timecode coming from a Tentacle Sync E directly connected to the microphone port of the camera. So that way the signal of the camera in audio and video is synchronized and with the correct timecode. Then with this other camera, the Canon EOS R2, this one is a local recording to a normal SD card inside of the camera, and again it is connected with a Sync E, and that way we have timecode there in the audio file as well. Then as we go down here, we have the iPhone, and in this case we were using the Rec app, and that is an application that actually supports timecode with the Track E as well as Sync E. So that's really powerful, and I'm gonna make a video specifically about that as well. And here we have the file timecode because the Rec app actually takes the timecode information from one of the devices that you have around in Bluetooth reach. So it could be a Sync E or a Track E. And then with that, it will include the timecode information from that inside of the file. Now, something you can see here is that the frame rate in the file timecode is actually different from the others, because normally I use everything at 24 frames per second. However, at this case, I was actually using the iPhone with a frame rate of 60 frames a second in 4K. Now, that was an error on my part. However, the software can still work with this, so that's really cool. Then down here we have more files, and this way we have audio files, and the 4 up here are the 2 track E devices, which I started and stopped in between. And those are 32-bit float, 48,000 Hertz. And of course they have file timecode because they are enabled to have that inbuilt. And then lastly, we have the Zoom F6, and the Zoom F6 was not connected to a Sync E whilst recording. However, what I did was I connected a Sync E in the beginning to the Zoom F6, and that way the internal clock of the Zoom F6 actually gets updated with the timecode signal from the Sync E. And then I can unplug it. The internal clock of the Zoom F6 will keep that timecode for about a day, and I can use the timecode device, in this case the Sync E, with another camera. So that way I can use 2 cameras and a Zoom F6 with just 2 Sync E devices. So this way we also have timecode in the file on the Zoom F6. And now, as you can see, we have all of this, and we can also use a sync map to actually look at how all of that looks on a timeline. And as you can see with that, we have the iPhone tracks right here. And I think this one right there should also be the iPhone track and probably should be on the 4th right here. But we also have the Canon EOS R, the 2 right there. We have Canon EOS R1. And then we also have all the audio channels down here as well, with the Zoom F6 being the one that was running from start to finish. So what you can see here is that you can check everything and see if it lines up correctly, at least on a kind of like a grand scale. Of course, you can zoom in here. However, I personally have found that I just trust that everything works, bring it over to my program like Premiere Pro, and do my fine adjustments there. What I can do, however, is I can change certain things if I don't want certain things to behave the way that they are set up by default. So in this case, for example, you can see we have the audio tracks down here, and we have a couple of settings down at the bottom, and one of them is keep camera audio. And in this case, for example, if you don't want to do that, you can uncheck that, and then you would only have the audio from the external recorders. However, I usually like to keep that checked so that I can also have these available in my editing program. Then you also have multi-mode, and in this case, it would just show you one camera at any given moment. However, I don't use it that way. I always use it in multicam mode so that you can actually see that there are multiple cameras available and on which channel they are being put. Now, what you can adjust here is that you have a lot of different settings available here that you cannot really see. And what you can, however, do is right-click on things. So in this case, for example, if you want to zoom in here on the file up here, this right there, this iPhone track, this should be somewhere else. Now what you can do is you can actually zoom in here and you can have a couple of details for example, this track right here. We can show it in the file browser, in the Finder, or show info. And with that, we can go into the show in file browser. And there we can see that this is the iPhone rec file. And it was created at 15/38/27. Now, something that I kind of guess is that this was probably recorded before all the other ones were recorded. And based on that, I would say this might not be something that can synchronize, because all the others, as you can see here, this is at 16:33 and then this is at 15:38. And that is, of course, a huge difference. And now, as I remembered, this is actually a file that was not using the timecode from the Sync E or the Track E, and it was just using the phone's timecode setting. So this is a file that we have to remove, and with that, we can actually do that by right-clicking here again. We can have a couple more settings and have the remove file, because it is not a file that fits into our set. So we can remove that, and with that we have it out of the system here. However, the file in the file system still stays intact and in place. Now, what you also saw is that there are a bunch of different settings available here as well. We can add more files, we can assign a sync group so that we can, for example, say which camera goes into which group. We can set a sync source, so if you want to choose the file timecode or the audio timecode, and that makes sense if you, for example, have audio timecode and the file timecode, and you want to choose between those two, you can do that by right-clicking and set sync source. You can set an offset if you know that those files or this one specific file needs that. You can also shift the audio and the video. You can show information so that you can get even more information about those files that you have right there. And of course, you can also show the file in your Finder so that you can make sure to, I don't know, rename it, move it somewhere else, or such things. And then last but not least, you have the Read Audio Timecode button or function key here. And you can also do that by hitting Command R, and then you get this little window here. And with that, you can read the timecode again. However, usually I have it set up that the timecode actually is read upon loading the files. And I have made the experience that even if you have long files, it works really, really quickly. And that's actually something where you can go into the settings and you have the audio timecode import setting, read audio timecode on import. I would always leave that turned on. And the same thing is automatically applying AV shift on import if that's necessary. Setting sync groups, linear timeline mode, preserves gaps. I don't like that because it makes no sense to me. I want to have everything kind of like squished together. And of course, you have a lot more settings on here. I don't necessarily change a lot there, so that's there if you need it. And there's also a lot of information by clicking on these question marks so that you know what you're doing and what those settings are doing for you. What I do want to take a look at here is the export functions or the export modules that are available to you. Personally, I mostly use the XML export. However, I also want to mention a little bit about the media export. The media export here, if you click on that, you can see that you can choose your destination, of course, but you also have options available down here. And this media export mode essentially gives you the option to embed metadata timecode into the files that you have recorded, even if you recorded them with, for example, the audio timecode from the Tentacle Sync E. Now, that's a possibility here. You can, of course, also change what kind of video file you want to be output. So, for example, you could take all of your files, throw them in here, and with that also reprocess or transcode them to, for example, Apple ProRes 422 or 422 LT proxy and so on. And you're even asked if you want to resize your footage. So this can be easily used to either create ProRes files from the files that you have from your camera, or you can actually have this to the work to create proxy files for you to work with in your NLE if you want to do that. I personally don't do that at the moment because I am able to handle the files that come from my other camera if I have them, and my main camera already records into the Atomos Ninja V, which also is recording in ProRes 422 LT, which then of course is very easily read by my MacBook Pro. So this is a process that you can use to make your life a little easier on the editing front if you want to use, for example, ProRes and also resize your files to be smaller or bigger. The same thing can be done for audio here. You can pass through or do a little bit of the editing right there, and I just leave it as pass through. And the other settings is what kind of output file you want, a synchronized QuickTime movie, original media with embedded timecode, and if you want to create a QuickTime reference movie. Now this is very powerful. However, it also takes a lot of power because as you do the transcoding, as far as I'm aware, you can't do other syncing, and your computer usually is pretty much blocked by that process, not really able to do that much more work. So this is something that I would only use if, for example, I wanted to also have all the transcoding done by this. However, it might even be better to do transcoding with Media Encoder and then use this just for the timecode add up or the timecode lineup in your timeline. So again, this works. It is really powerful to be able to embed the timecode into your files if you want that in your workflow. However, it is something that takes quite a while to then save your data. However, the faster process that I like to use is the XML export. And with that, I just click the XML button right there, change the place where I want to put it. In this case, let's put it on the desktop. I don't usually rename those files a lot because I work so quickly and I just move forward so fast that untitled for one project is enough if I have just one folder full of synchronized files. And of course, I use Premiere Pro, so that's what I set right there. You can also use this for Final Cut. And you can also decide if you want to include the synchronized clips or not. So that's something that helps Premiere Pro. However, also, if you just export the XML file, it will reference the files where you have them stored, so you don't really have to do that. Project frame rate is based on the usual frame rate. Project format is based on the largest file. In this case, usually I would say 1080p is the one that I would choose because that's what I want to work with at the moment. Project audio format is set there as well. And then I can save. Now this is getting saved to the desktop with a little bit of a log message right there. So I have information about that. And with that, the synchronization here is done. We can minimize this or close it actually. And we are going to go back into Premiere Pro. Now here, I can actually just go to the Finder window, find the untitled XML file. And if I drag and drop this into this project right here, now we have a whole folder ready to go. Here we have a sync map. So this is our synchronized timeline basically. And we have a folder with all the original files for this sync map. And now if I open this up, you can see we have our files ready to go and the audio is also there. And you can see that there's actually a lot of audio, a lot of video, a lot of starting and stopping. And I actually did not do one clap sync, except for, I think I did one clap right here at the beginning. Yeah, and that's all. So all of these cameras just were started and stopped every now and then to just demonstrate how easy it is to synchronize these things together without ever having a look at the waveform. Now, as these things are imported, we can get rid of some of the audio that I don't use or that was not recorded from the Adamus Ninja V, for example. Hit the Shift key if you're moving things up and down so you don't move them left and right. And with that, we have all of these things ready to go and it is nicely synchronized. And that is how you can work with the Tentacle Sync Studio to synchronize files that have timecode information, either in the audio channel with audio timecode or in the metadata with the appropriate settings there. I think it is a really powerful application to do exactly this job, and it can save hours and hours in synchronization work if you have the setup to work with timecode. Now, my question for you today is, do you use timecode synchronization and how do you do the timecode sync on the computer? What kind of application are you using? Or is Tentacle Sync Studio maybe a software for you? You can leave a comment down below and we can have a conversation about that. Now, if you have any questions also about Tentacle Sync Studio or anything related to timecode synchronization, you can also leave a comment down below and I'm gonna try to answer you there or make a video specifically about your question. Now, while you're down there, it will also help a lot if you give this video a thumbs up. That helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And of course, it also helps me know better what kind of videos you like on my channel. With all of that said, I hope you have an amazing day, synchronize all your footage, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao!